Hey everyone, got your coffees and teas? Yeah? Cool. I want to start off by sharing with you a story. This was like the summer of 2021, and I had just become a director at GitHub. I'd been their manager before. And I started running this group called GitHub Actions Hosted Runners. Has anyone here used GitHub Actions? Yeah, some of you. So basically my group was responsible for, say you have an Actions job, it needs to get scheduled on a virtual machine, run it, and send the results back. I know it sounds simple, but it's very complex under the hood. Take my word for it? Yeah, okay. And the reason why the summer was tough is because I was new to this role, and we started having a lot of incidents. Not a great start. And there was no one specific root cause for these incidents. Some of them were related to human error. Someone makes a deploy which didn't go great. Some of them were related to scale. So the service is growing, users are growing. And some of them were related to, we call it abuse of our platform, but Bitcoin mining, anybody on free compute? Yeah. So there was no one specific root cause. And the engineers were great. They rolled up their sleeves, they fixed all these incidents. But I was like, I don't want this to happen ever again. Not under my watch. What do I do? And I started reflecting on all the different tools I had used as an engineering leader or as an engineer in my past jobs. I was like, And I remembered back when I was at Atlassian, I was an engineer. I had an amazing engineering leader who had introduced this tool called operational reviews. And that really helped build the operational muscle of my organization. And in fact, when I was a manager back at GitHub, I had sort of used that tool with my team too. And I just failed to scale it as a director of my organization. Hi, everyone. I am Iccha Sethi, and I'm a senior director of engineering at GitHub now, running Actions, code spaces, NPM packages, and pages. Yep. Different gamuts of products, different levels of maturity, different challenges. I worked at companies small and big, startups, and I've carried this tool with me throughout my journey. And here today, I'm here to share with you about how I think about operational maturity, potentially giving you some language to think about operational maturity, and how you can use this tool as well to maintain operational excellence in your organization. Have I said the word operational enough times? Take a sip of coffee if you hear that word during this presentation. You're like, great, Iccha, this tool worked for you. How can this tool help me? I have designed the perfect service ever. Nothing is going to go wrong. Even if you've designed the perfect service, you're adding features to it over a period of time, right? You are growing your customer base, the usage patterns are differing, and it's never quite the same service that you started with, right? And ultimately, why are we building these services? It is for the customer, and it's what their experience is what matters at the end of the day. And operational health is a great way for us to keep tabs on how the customer experience is evolving over the period of time, and if your services are actually being successful in accomplishing that goal. So, like I said, the first part of my talk, we're going to walk through this operational maturity model so we have a common language to talk about this. I personally have mixed feelings about models and which tell you you're at this level or this other level, but models are merely guidelines. They are an oversimplification of reality. So take everything here and apply your own lens to it, right? The model is going to have 5 components and 3 levels. Now, the right level for your business, it depends on your business model, your business maturity, and the type of product you're building. No specific level is going to be good or bad. It's all in the context of what you are building. And finally, as we go through this, take a note of where you think you are currently and where you want to be. Kind of do a fun poll towards the midway through this section so that everyone can share with each other, hey, this is where we are and this is where we're going. Okay, I know this is huge. Don't have to read everything. I'll be breaking this down. But 3 things to take away from this is the levels. The model basically has 3 levels: reactive, adaptive, and proactive. Sort of self-explanatory, we'll go into more details. It has 5 components: availability and incidents, data and metrics, people and processes, product and architecture, and finally, engineering efficiency. Diving right in. Now, with availability and incidents, if you think about being reactive, a lot of times your customers are telling you, hey, this part of your website is not working, or this part of your service is slow or buggy. You don't necessarily have all the instrumentation internally to know how you are performing. Another way to look at it is maybe you have it, but you're just having a ton of incidents, and not all of them are real incidents. It's kind of just chaotic. Level 2 is you've learned a lot through the way you're adaptive. Most of your incidents are caught by alerts, so you're the one mostly statusing for your service or your product. Still, there are gaps. For example, you don't have outside-in monitoring. Those are still notified by customers. You might have some form of SLOs, SLAs you think about. If you don't know those definitions, don't worry. I'll be going into more detail later. And finally is proactive. I want you to imagine a world where a severity 3 alert or severity 4 alert comes in. It tells you, hey, your memory is spiking or your CPU is spiking on your container or your virtual machine. Automatically, an auto mitigation process spins up. It vertically scales it or horizontally scales it based on your system. Whew, crisis averted. Your engineer didn't have to even be involved in the system. That is being proactive, right? Or another way to think about it is you are doing controlled experiments. You're creating intentional failure modes to learn from them to minimize customer impact. Has anyone run through like an Azure region outage or an AWS outage? Half the internet's down, right? And your team doesn't know what to do. Everyone's scrambling. When's the last time we did a failover of this database? Oh my God, have you ever done it? But instead of doing controlled disaster recovery operations, you have all your playbooks in place, you have all your automation. That's the proactive mode. Data and metrics. I just put this together to give you a gamut of what data and metrics can look like. It's like a huge surface area. It can range from like service metrics like throughput and latency and P99, P95, to load testing, to user satisfaction. It's like a huge gamut. In level 1, your data doesn't fully exist. You may have some basic metrics. You may have throughput. You're capturing error codes. Every team is doing slightly differently. Some of them are capturing HTTP status. Some of them are capturing code. There's no consistency. And you may not even fully understand what is the data you need, right? Level 2 is more about you have the basic data. You have your SLOs, you have the main data you need, but you may not be sophisticated enough where you're thinking about granular data. A couple of examples. Say my service calls 3 different dependencies. Am I capturing the success rate of those dependencies, the latency of those dependencies, how often those dependencies go down? Am I breaking down my incident time into multiple components? So you might not have all the different granular components, but you might have what you need high level. A proactive level is where you are in a space where you are thinking ahead about making data-driven decisions. What is the data I need to make a decision? Do I have that? You have all the granular data, and it's not like you're swimming in a sea of data. You know how to interpret and use that data as well. Okay, quick reminder. Make a mental note, a written note of where you think you are versus where you want to be as we go through this, yeah? People and processes. Has anyone here been in an incident where you're like, I'm Paige, but this is not my service, it's the permissions team, but they're called Yellow Duck Pie Squad, or are they called, what's their PagerDuty name? Is it Onion Lake something quiche? I don't know. Who do I page? They have all these code names. Then you page the wrong person. There are 20 people on the call. There's no strict processes and definitions in this level. And then the incident is reverted, and who's going to do the incident review or cleanup? It's either not it, or I don't want to step on his toes, you're being too nice. And that's because there's lack of clarity in roles and responsibilities, and there's lack of processes to help your team be successful. In level 2, you have the basic processes in place. You have, who to page, you have an incident review or a postmortem which occurs after the incident, but you still struggle with some aspects of accountability. And what I mean by that is my incident review generated 25 action items. We had a brilliant discussion. How many of them actually get done? Who follows up if they're getting done or not? Your accountability is not end-to-end. At GitHub, we have this process where you're supposed to prioritize your repair items. You put the severity levels associated with them. And then you have SLAs, like high severity, you got to complete this issue within 7 days. Or medium severity, 30 days. And if you do not complete it, your team or your service will be flagged to your manager, it will be flagged to your exec leaders. There's accountability all through the chain. So everybody knows what their role is in the system, and there's clear processes and accountability. Product and architecture. I'll start with the most mature view of the world over here. Of course, in this level, you are designing for resiliency. You are having intentional conversations with your product partner. Hey, if my billing system is down, do I not run this job? Or do I say, hey, billing will catch up, I'll put it on a queue, and I'll still go run this job? We're willing to take the risk that the customer never ends up paying, right? So you're having these conversations and making intentional trade-offs, and you're proactively instrumenting your service so that you can make data-driven decisions. Like, for example, how often did we end up losing money? How often did the billing system end up going down? So you're starting with the mindset of, what will I be reviewing operational health-wise, and how do I bake this into how I build a service? And it's, as you can imagine, if you're following along this model, you can extrapolate. Level 1 is you're designing mostly for your happy path, right? I just want my service to work. I just want it to serve the most basic use cases to my customer. I'll worry about the other things later. And if you think about this, when I was telling you levels are neither good nor bad, say you're a seed stage startup, right? You're working on product market fit. And in that case, level 1 might be an okay place for you to be at. That's the right place for your organization. But say if you're an identity service provider, people are relying on you, right? At that point, you should be thinking of level 3. Last one, engineering efficiency. This is a very rough rubric. It's all about how you think about unplanned work. Every team's got a backlog, but how often do things get thrown out the window and you're just like, oh gosh, there was this incident. Oh gosh, there were these slew of bugs. How much time are you spending on reactive work? And when I say, like, say level 1 is like 30% of the time, it doesn't mean it's consistently 30% of the time. It could be like, peaks and valleys. You have 2-3 weeks of like lots of unplanned work, 70%, 80%, the whole team is surging. Things are great for another 3 weeks, and again, there's another 70% surge. So it's more like time amortized over a period of time. Yeah. Okay. So hopefully I dove into this big model and zoomed back out, and you'll have been kind of taking a note of where you are and where you want to be. Normally I'd say don't use your phones, but this is a part where I'd love for you to take out your phones and join the Slido, because you are not on your availability or operational health journey alone, right? We're all in here with you. And who knows, maybe you may talk to people after this to share your lessons learned. And kind of share with us, what is your current level of operational health maturity? And you're like, I've rated 5 components, how do I do this? Take an average, round up, 0.5 and below, round up, and then 0.5 and below, round down. Cool, I see some 2s, some 1. Okay, we've got like a clear cohort in this audience. Where do you want to be? What is your desired level? And you can put it in a time frame in your head. This is where I want to be at the end of a year. Or wouldn't we all like to be at 3, never be paged, all the processes resolve everything for us? Cool. And the next one is, this model is big, right? You necessarily might not want to work on all the parts of it. What is the most important problem for you to solve related to operational maturity in your organization? You can choose to use the language used in the model, or it can be something which is not even mentioned there. And I think you can enter more than one entry into the form too. Data and metrics, observability, incident handling, people buy-in, yeah. Reducing engineer time spent, you are not alone, yeah. Lots of people, similar problems. Thank you so much for participating in this. I want to move on now that we have a common language to talk about operational maturity, and you have a rough idea of what are the things you want to improve. As we go through this operational review tool or process, as I call it, you can try to think about how can you apply this to solve that problem that you mentioned, okay? So keep that in mind as we go in. One thing this operational review process will try to do is push you towards being more data-driven. Because without data, it's all biases. Your recency bias comes into play most often is what I have seen. Had a large incident, that's what you orient towards. Or this was a fire right now. Even if you're at level 1, you can just start with what you have. My actual operational review process has 20 segments in it, but I'm not going to go into all of those today. I'm going to start out with a select few to give you a flavor of what it can look like, and then how you can customize it to your need. what's important with each segment of the operational review is what is the goal of that segment? What are you trying to achieve? For example, the incident segment of my operational review is not a postmortem. This is not where you're first reviewing the incident or doing a review of that incident. That is a separate meeting. Your engineers are spending 30 plus minutes going through that. That is different. This is not a place for that. This is a place more to review your incidents together in the past month or like in some time frame to put that information more in context together. Here is an example of the data I reviewed to achieve that goal. When did that incident happen? What was the title? And when I say status, it's like red or yellow. And TTD and TTM. I know some people may not be familiar with this terminology, so I'll quickly go into what that means. Google has lots of great resources on this if anyone wants to do a deep dive. But basically, you have an incident, right? Something is going wrong. It doesn't mean you know immediately what's going wrong. You're notified by some methodology that, hey, an incident is occurring in your system. In level 1, it could be a customer telling you through support tickets or an angry Slack message, whatever it may be, the choice of medium. Or it may be an automated alert in a level 2 or a 3 system. The time between when things were going wrong to when you actually knew they were going wrong is time to detect. And then, your engineers hop on call to try to apply a couple of fixes. And when you first get something working, that is your time to mitigate. You've applied your mitigation, your fix, but you have this huge queue of jobs worked up. Happens in actions all the time. You've recovered, but I have all these requests to process. And so the time it takes to catch up fully is your time to recover. Now, if you're starting with level 1, you may not have this granularity, and I did not start with TTD and TTM and all these metrics. I very much started with what was my total incident time. And over time, we built that maturity and started breaking it down. The reason why these two especially are interesting to me is because my time to detect is the portion which builds the customer trust, right? They get the assurance that I'm statusing, I know what's going on in my systems. And your time to mitigate is how long it takes for you to figure out what's going wrong. Now, between the two, if you instrument it and you get those two, I would recommend, if you want to improve one thing, start with your TTD, right? Get your detection down so that you at least know what's going wrong before you start thinking about improving your time to mitigate. The next one, impact. So I have this brilliant principal engineer in my org who started suggesting we start including in this metric in our reviews. And I'll tell you how we use it. So this is from a public status page. You can go to status.github.com. You can find this yellow incident, and let me walk you through a real-world example. On November 21st at 9:50 UTC, we had this incident. We began to saw recovery by 10:02. So that's 12 minutes of TTM, time to mitigate, right? During this time, 100% of jobs were delayed for 11 minutes. And then things happen, and around 2% was still impacted until 11:27. So that's roughly 70 plus minutes. We still had 2% of customers impacted. Now, if I look at this whole time to mitigate, different customers, lots of customers had different experiences. And the way we calculate impact score is 100% of 11 minutes plus 2% of these 70 plus minutes. It gives me sort of a score. This was status yellow. Now imagine that instead of 2%, 30% of customers were impacted for 74 minutes. That is a huger customer base of mine which was impacted. And I want to know, because not all yellows are the same. I want to review more in detail what are the impact beyond just a yellow that my customers are experiencing through an incident. So starting to break these down starts giving you better insight into what weight you should put on different types of root causes for incidents, and you can make investments based on that. I started also reviewing trends, and we started doing 6-month rolling. Because if you just look at the last month, it's not enough. It's not enough time, because it takes time to make improvements in your system. And the questions were the most interesting part of the review. We push people to think about things like, hey, we spent 2 quarters working on making these amazing dashboards with 3 engineers. Did it make an impact? Did our time to mitigate go down really? So you're really tying your investments back to the conversation of your real-world data. And those are the type of tough conversations you should be having in your operational review while reviewing data like this. Okay. SLOs. Again, going back, what is my goal here? My goal here is to get a numerical review of the customer experience. Is everyone kind of familiar with SLOs, SLAs, SLIs? Mostly, yeah? We'll go through a quick review of some definition, and again, a real-world example of how we break it down into an operational review. So, since this crowd knows a lot of this, I will just do a quick review. So SLA is your service level agreement, which is your contract with your customer, which there are financial penalties if you breach this contract, right? You're promising them, hey, my round trip time is going to be 500 milliseconds for 98% of requests. Your SLO, or your service level objective, is the internal target you're setting for the bar you want to meet. And this has to be higher than what you're promising your customers, right? And so as you can see, it's 99% with a lower millisecond. Now this is my objective, but my SLI is my service level indicator. It's about how am I actually performing with this objective that I set. Real world, it's more complicated. Okay, so again, I'll break it down. Bear with me. This is, again, on our public page. You can review this SLA. GitHub commits to maintain at least 99.9% uptime. What is uptime, you say, for actions? It's total triggered executions minus unavailable executions by total times 100. Great. What is unavailable executions? So over here, unavailable execution is an execution which failed to run, where you didn't capture output within 5 minutes after the trigger was fired. Now, in reality, in the backend system, there can be a number of reasons for why it took more than 5 minutes for something to fire. It could be an error, and it failed immediately. It could be our queues built up, if you saw the whole time to recover. And then when I review things internally, I want to break them down. Here are my different objectives. I want my jobs to happen between these times. I want my errors to be less than this. I account for different failure modes and experiences customers have, and they have individual SLOs, which make up a composite SLO. So I'm reviewing each of these individually to make sure that my service is meeting customer expectations. I'm reviewing month-over-month trends, which are telling me, is my SLI improving or not? Okay, here's the most juicy part of this section. This, you may all know, is correlating SLOs to your incidents. Pages, I have a fantastic director running Pages. So Pages was having this slew of customer support issues where they're like, I can't access my pages. What is going on? None of our alerts fired. Our SLO looked fantastic, but our customers are still not having a great experience. And so we ended up doing a gray incident or non-statusing incident to review that. We were like, why don't I see anything in my SLO? It's like looking great. Turns out we had gaps in the way we, have our monitors and SLOs. There was a missing load balancer layer of information. So correlate the information. What you're looking in one section, does it reflect the reality in the other section? Another example on the opposite side is for actions. We have an internal SLO, and the SLO was not looking great during this period of time. But I was seeing no incidents. I'm like, hey, support, are you seeing issues come in last month? Like, our SLO isn't looking great. Are people complaining about it? They're like, no, it's all great. Like, nothing we heard. And, we send the team investigating. What's going on here? The past 2 months, I'm seeing, like, our SLO isn't great. And they do this investigation, and they realize that, actions gives you, like, a max concurrency. Say, for example, it's 20. And if you queue your 21st job or your 22nd job, it won't run unless some of your previous jobs complete and makes a slot for the new jobs to come in. Now, what we were doing is we didn't take that into account, right? We were taking your 21st, your 25th job all into account while calculating our SLI. And so again, that was a gap we identified of not truly representing customer experience. And we went and we fixed it. So again, ask the whys, correlate your information. Honestly, the reason I review number of alerts is because I want my engineers to be happy, right? Oh gosh, so I was on this team back in Atlassian. We were the Orange Duck Squad of team names. And we were gonna be the best team ever. We're gonna have the most performant, operationally best est service, if that term even exists. And we instrumented our service, set really low thresholds for alerts, because we wanted to be on top of everything for our service. Guess how long that lasted? I was paged at 12, I was paged at 12:30, I was paged at 2 a.m., and it would all be a blip and it would self-resolve. No one made us do this. It was just self-inflicted, right? And then, we tweaked it and we made it better. I mean, there are times where this is not self-inflicted too, right? CRUD accumulates over a period of time. And it's good for us to review how much signal versus noise exists in your system, because it's just going to cause fatigue and in turn lead to you not catching real issues or your engineers just being tired and frustrated. Now, you're like, okay, it makes sense to review this at the team level. Why are you reviewing this kind of at upper leadership levels too? Because I want to make time to make sure we're going and fixing these things, right? Sometimes the teams have full backlogs, and if you're looking at this information at different levels, you can be advocates for your engineers to be like, it's okay, go make time to fix this, because I want you to not worry about high noise alerts. This was me stressing out creating my risk register for this talk, just kidding. I did not account for Google Slides having issues on extended monitors. Should include that for my next presentation. But the reason I have this is, as you know in a company, different people have different expertise, and they're like, I know we'll have to scale this database in 6 months, but it's fine for now, I don't have time. Or somebody's like, we should eventually rotate these certs, but you know what, we'll get to it, I'm sure. That gives me anxiety. I like knowing all my risks, right? And this is mostly a way for you to dump that information in one place and intentionally say, this is a risk I'm okay not funding, versus this is a risk we should go fund. You're like, okay, this is a sheet. Why do you need to review this in your operational review? It's all about tying to the other sections, like we said. So, for example, if you're having a number of incidents relating to that database scale, and it's a risk which you're going to get to, maybe 2 quarters away, you have the conversation, should we be pulling that in? Or it's not funded, should we figure out how to get that done? So again, it's for you to correlate this information with all your other sections of operational review. I love deep dives as part of my operational review because other people come and present, and I learn from them, and my team learns from them. For example, I had somebody present how they build should I status widget in Datadog dashboard. Has anyone seen that? It's like really cool. We built it, but anyone can build it. So you basically have a graph which tells you should I status or not, and it's basically calculating that information based on all your SLOs and alerts in your system. It's a composite metric. And it was so awesome that this engineer did this effort, and when they came and they shared it, multiple teams eventually ended up adopting it. So it's that kind of stuff where we're learning from each other, diving deeper into understanding of systems, helps me stay technical, at least I'd like to think so. And it's a great way to dedicate time to a topic. Your operational review can be whatever you want it to be, like I said. Over periods of time, I've included things like security issues, what's the cost of running my services, performance, supportability, which is like how many support tickets are my teams handling. You can make or remove whatever section you want. Say you're at level 1, you can start with just incidents. You don't need to have anything else. Just be consistent. As I've been talking about this talk, I've been talking about doing operational reviews as like an engineer, as a manager, as a director. And I kind of wanted to formalize that a little bit and share with you how to think about it. So when I was a manager for one of our runners team, we had a weekly operational review with all the engineers. It was a part of our on-call handoff. And we would review individual SLIs, like how did Ubuntu 18 do? How did Ubuntu 20 do? Like you really broke it down. We reviewed all our alerts. And we dug deeper into questions like, great, I was 99.97 this week. Last week, I was 99.98. Where did that 0.01% go? None of our alerts fired. Can we go dig in? Like at a team level, you can push for a different level of granularity as you choose to. At the organizational level, I've seen it done 2 ways. When I was back at Atlassian, my organizational leader, he had a weekly operational review where each on-call engineer for each person shared their weekly numbers. This was great because we were building a brand new product, which we knew was going to have high scale needs. And it just helped us build that operational muscle grounds up because it was kind of brand new. It was 0 at that point. But the conversations were a lot more tactical, right? How do you tune alerts, learn from other teams? But now at GitHub, I chose to do it slightly differently because we had cascading operational reviews already. Teams were kind of doing theirs. I was like, okay, at this level, I want to make sure we're looking more for trends. We're looking for investments. We're looking for larger thematic topics that we want to pull out of this. So again, like I'm telling you, it's super flexible. You can tweak it to whatever level you want to apply it to. Okay, hopefully I've piqued some interest. You want to apply some form of this into your organization or your team. How do I introduce this? Show your manager this presentation. I'm just kidding. Start small, right? Like I was saying, pick one thing, pick 2 things, right? Pick incidents, pick alerts. Start there. You don't need to have your fancy broken down TTM, TTD, TTE, TTR, that kind of stuff. Just start with number of incidents and total time for an incident. Or start with how many were notified by a customer versus detected by us. Make it yours and focus on what's important. And make sure that you're just not talking kind of for the sake of talking in that meeting, but what are the things you want to improve? And take feedback from people, like how do we make this better? because the operational review that I started with and the one we have right now is a much more evolved form over the years. Now, this is for a little bit of the lessons learned kind of section and the different pitfalls I've encountered. Lack of action or lack of buy-in. So lack of buy-in is why should I do this? It's work. I have enough things on my plate. Lack of buy-in generally happens when people don't see value coming out of this. They see lack of action. Now, if you're meeting and you're taking action based on this, people are generally bought in that this is improving something in my organization. So make sure that it's not a mere discussion, you're taking action. Lack of asking tough questions. I don't want to be the person being like, hey, your team spent all this time doing X and I'm not seeing your metrics improve. Or, asking tough questions like, hey, every month you come to me with the same number of incidents. You're coming to me with nothing improving. What's going on? So if you're not going to ask the tough questions, and this is not just because true for an operational review, it's true for any meeting, right? You're not having that candid discussions about how to get better. So this is something we've had to push on as a team to be like, it's okay, because the data is right there to have those discussions. High overhead. So this is more true in your level 1s and 2s, especially, where because your data might reside in different sources, different forms, it really takes a long time to put together the operational review report. I would say automate. We have a GitHub action generating this information, pulling from different sources. Over time, worked on standardization of definitions. You don't have to do all that. Start with just the automation maybe. It could still pull from different sources. So think about how you can reduce the burden. And the final one, I've cited a couple of examples about blindly trusting your data. Don't trust your data. Question it, always. Data is great, but question your data. Understand the why. So I started off with my story of summer 2021. Since then, multiple parts of GitHub have adopted operational reviews. The hosted runners organization is one of the most operationally mature organizations, and thankfully we haven't had a slew of repeats since then. Hopefully this talk gives you some language how you can think about your operational maturity and some ideas on how you can apply the tool of operational review in your organization. Just think about what's the goal you're trying to achieve and how you can iteratively get there. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
How often do you do your operational reviews?
So the individual teams do it weekly. I do it monthly. Because I'm looking for more trends and analysis, that's the cadence. But the individual teams do it weekly.
Are they an hour long? Are they multiple hours long? What kind of thing?
Yeah, sure. So the one I have is 90 minutes because I have multiple product areas and I try to do an async read of the information and write down the topics or the hotspots to discuss. I've seen teams do 30 minutes as a part of the handoff if there isn't much to discuss. So it very much depends on how big the surface area is and how deep you want to go. For example, I may not discuss things like costs or any of those other sections every single time unless there's an anomaly worth discussing in that meeting. Those parts you can just go over async and be like, it's not worth a synchronous conversation in this meeting. Good question, thank you. Cool, so I'll try to make the diagram of the operational model available offline. I'll post it somewhere, LinkedIn or something else, or the Slack channel. But I'm around if you want to ask any questions privately, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn as you think through this for your organization and come up with any other questions. Thank you for being a wonderful audience. Yeah.